Hi, I'm Chaplain Larry Crabtree with the St. Mary's County Sheriff's Office and the Maryland State Police.
And I'm Chaplain Charlie Wharton with the St. Mary's County Sheriff's Office.
Well, Charlie, we have been involved in, I think, a very relevant and practical series dealing with our emotions, how to understand them, how to communicate them, and how others perceive what we're feeling and how we're communicating it. And so I think something that might be really helpful in law enforcement work might be the issue of how is it that we communicate with people who just don't want to communicate, people who might be a little upset, or they're upset with you. So what do we do in those kind of circumstances and experiences?
You mean not everybody wants to talk to us when we show up?
Yeah, unfortunately not.
Okay. I think there are a couple of things that are vitally important in this, and the first one is we need to understand that at least one person needs to be in control of the communication process, and we can't rely on them to be the one that's in control. And when I talk about control, we're not talking about manipulation. We're just talking about somebody that has the emotional and the logical capacity to make sure that this is going to go in a positive direction. A second aspect that is so important is to realize that whenever we show up on most scenes, they're smoldering with emotion. And we carry with us two buckets. The first bucket is filled with gasoline, the second bucket is filled with water. And we get the choice to make which one we're going to dump on that smoldering fire. So it's important to understand that communication under conflict is difficult, but it's also doable.
Yeah. So, since this is something that we can tackle, it's something we need to be aware of. We all know it's a reality. We've all been in that experience many times. What are some practical, effective to-dos to help assist with that communication?
I think the first thing is to practice self-awareness. We talked about this when we were talking about emotional intelligence. But it is something that every day when we go to work and every call that we go on, we need to do a little bit of an emotional inventory. How am I doing right now? If I started out my day with a discussion, with a fight with my wife, and the kids not wanting to go to school, and then I get to the office and I've got all of this paperwork that I need to get done, and they burn my donuts or whatever else, if I'm not in a good mood, I need to be aware of that, because that can carry over into my interaction. Not only that, but we all have pet peeves, we all have biases that we're going to carry into something, and we need to be aware of that. We need to be upfront with ourselves about what's going to happen. A second thing that we need to do is we need to make it a point to respond rather than react. Reaction it comes from inside, an emotional outpouring that really isn't channeled. Response is, we may still have that same emotion, we may still have that same thought, but we're able to control it, we're able to add logic to it.
So Charlie, would a good definition of reacting simply be that we act without thought?
Correct. It comes from inside as opposed to from the brain.
Yeah.
I think a third thing that we need to discuss is an understanding of our limits of authority. And here's what I mean by that. Have you ever found yourself in a situation where you make a promise or you make a threat that you can't follow through? In other words, if you show up on a scene and somebody's not communicating with you, or they're not doing what you want them to do, and you say, if you keep doing that, I'm going to take you to jail. And then all of a sudden you realize you can't do that. It's not a jailable offense, or you don't have enough information for that. When that happens, we lose credibility, and we give the other person the upper hand in that communication process.
You know, that's a lot what happens in debates. When you don't have a good answer, or you don't know how to respond, you tend to attack that person. You throw out these emotional, vitreous responses, and that doesn't work.
There's an interesting word from debate. It's called ad hominem. And that's exactly what it is. I can't argue the facts, so I'm going to turn on you.
Yeah.
And we see this a lot in politics. We see this a lot in social issues, but we see it quite a bit in law enforcement. Let me give you an example of this. Let's say you pick up maybe an adolescent or a juvenile, and they've got a pocket full of marijuana. And you take them to their parents, and rather than, like we would expect, their parents are going to support you in what you do, the parents turn on you. They can't argue the fact that little Jimmy's got a pocket full of weed, so what do? You cops, all you're doing is just out after little Jimmy. So it's important that we understand that and then get back to the issues and get it away from those personalities.
Excellent advice.
I think it's important that we understand that not everybody that we're dealing with is on the same emotional or even logical level that we expect. If you work nights, you're going to deal with a lot of people who have chemical issues. And I'm not just talking about long-term chemical issues. I'm talking about they've had too many tonight and they're not thinking about what they need to be doing. And if we try to communicate with them from a logical perspective, the logical part of their brain is not there. It's somewhere else. So be aware of that. We deal with a lot of people that have emotional issues. Some of them are clinical, some of them are mental health issues, but a lot more of them may be fueled by hatred, by fear, by anger. So we need to be able to understand that. And a third thing that we need to be very sensitive to are biases. Not only our own biases, but also the biases that other people might have.
And that's, I think, critically important, particularly in the culture that we're living in right now. We need to be very sensitive to that.
And I think maybe the crowning thing that we need to talk about is a decision that we make early on, and that is to treat people with tactical civility. Tactical means planned. Civility means treating people with respect. It doesn't matter who they are. It doesn't matter what they do. We have an obligation, not only as public servants, but I think also as human beings, to make a decision that we're going to treat people with respect. Because when we do that, we're going to take away a lot of the issues, a lot of that underlying emotion, and it's going to allow us to deal with what's in front of us right now.
Charlie, one final thought. What you're sharing is excellent. I'm actually enjoying this because this is so practical. Is it just police work that this is effective in, or does this work in other areas?
If I could do this as well in my family life as we do this on the street, my family life would be a lot better.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah,
this is so vitally important in our families. It's as we deal with our spouses, as we deal with our kids, as we deal with our coworkers. Yeah. Anytime there's a conflict, and whether it's something that's out on the street or something that's in the squad room or in the jail or wherever else, we need to be able to rely upon these key elements of conflict communication.
Charlie, thanks. I mean, these are excellent insights. I really appreciate it. Yeah, I think it's time to wrap up this segment. So, be strong.
And be safe.